Okay. What is your full name?
Michael Doyle Ryan.
Where are you from?
What do you mean? Where was I born?
Yes.
In Clawson, Michigan.
Okay. How old were you in 2009?
49 years old.
Okay. So, I'm interviewing you on the Great Repression. So,
Repression?
yeah, repression. It was like in the 2000s. So, what do you recall about your financial life before the Great Recession, before 2007?
Uh, I don't think it was getting. It was okay, just kind of marginal, just being able to pay the bills.
Yeah.
But people have been losing their jobs, and so I depend on them having jobs to make my money, and so it was kind of like a slow, steady grind down for the last 9 years.
Yeah. What about the government's actions in the economy before the repression?
Repression or recession?
Repression or
What do you mean?
recession? Yeah.
What do you mean the government's actions and the
Like how what did they do about it like before like leading up to it, like what was their role in the economy?
oh um, well they had their usual. I think they were encouraging lending for housing, which was kind of like the only thing holding things up for the last 6 or 7 years, but it's actually more vigorous in other parts of the country because I'm in Michigan where um, things were actually in decline probably for 5, 6, 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the If you consider before 2009 and in late 2008, there started being these business, or even earlier in the year that different. Well, they had collapse of Bear Stearns, so that was on the news, and that seemed like a one-off thing. They'd already said that they most of the problem was about housing and mortgages, and people that
Mm.
were getting mortgages with no matter how much they could afford or whatever. They said they were if they were alive, they would get approved for a mortgage some type or other. And so first they had ones what they called subprime, people with very poor credit scores or um, and no verification that they actually had any jobs um,
Yeah.
or income or assets or anything like that. And so they said, well, they thought they had that under control. And then they started having problems even with ones that they thought were actually pretty good mortgages, but of course also people started losing jobs. If few people lose jobs and a few more mortgages go bad, then the house prices start. They were starting already into decline by the
Mm.
time 2009 hit. I think I don't know. Some places it's 2005. I think around here it's probably 2003 where the house prices probably peaked.
Yeah. So have you experienced any economic hardships prior to 2007?
Well, back when I was in school, I think the recession from 80 to 82 was almost more severe.
Mm.
It just had much a faster recovery. It didn't seem fast enough at those days, but
Yeah.
yeah, there's been different times that the money was a little tight. Sometimes just life things like got married and I bought a house and
Yeah.
um, well, it was probably before I was totally had everything all set up to make sure I had enough to cover it with some other expenses, but then
Yeah.
then you had sewers go bad, things like that that required quite a bit of money after the new house I just bought. So
Yeah. Um, what financial hardships did you experience during this economic situation? Like a loss of a job, or loss of home, or loss of savings, stuff like that. Um,
well, most of it was a loss of extra reserves. I didn't lose my job, but my income went down substantially because I'm
mm-hmm.
self-employed. So
Yeah.
if people lose their jobs, they're not going to be coming in as customers as much, or or at all. Um,
Mm.
so my income went down, fairly first steadily and then fairly sharply, especially by 2010. it was just barely able to keep everything paid for. I didn't lose any job or any. I didn't have any new cars. I've been in the house for 6, 7 years, and um, the main thing was by 2010, which everything tends to have its effect more after they say the recession bottomed out in early 2009. But
Mm.
2010, we were already planning on going to California, and I had barely enough money and credit to get back and repair the vehicle that was breaking down on the way there.
Okay. So, what economic decisions did you and your family make in response to this severe economic situation?
Well, I'd already stopped for a couple of years contributing to my retirement. I didn't take anything out of that.
Mm.
Uh, we, you know, tried to avoid buying anything we didn't really absolutely think we needed. Uh, uh, I know that my father died in 2009. He had a small life insurance policy that sort of kept things going, but I know that one of the jobs I'd had cut back the number of days I was there because the state was having its budget problems, and so they cut back on what they'd cover for the Medicaid dental, and so therefore I had less money coming in for at least more than a year.
Yeah. So, what did you think of President Barack Obama's and the Congress's reaction to the Great Recession?
Well, they have to feel like they always say people feel like they have to be doing something. I mean, part of this was the end of George W. Bush's term. He said, well, you're going to have to keep General Motors and Chrysler going because they had so many people that were actually they probably were not making money for years. But they were paying out a lot of pension benefits and health care benefits that would fall to, somehow would affect the government's ability if. And so when Barack Obama started, so he kind of continued some of that, and then they had some gimmick type things like the cash for clunkers. They would give people
Yeah.
several $1,000s to turn in their old car, and then they make sure that they're trying to say, oh, okay, let's get rid of all these older vehicles that were uh, the older vehicles that were less fuel efficient because the gas prices had been going up because China has been using more petroleum, and we hadn't found fracking hadn't really affected things yet. So
Yeah.
there was more demand than supply in other parts of the world. Uh, but that actually caused a problem for people that couldn't afford, that needed reliable but cheap older cars because all of a sudden a lot of them went out of the market and were turned into scrap. So
Yeah.
and then there was some kind of they had a quick thing to try to um, give people a tax credit or money back if they bought a home. Mostly all of these things were just people that were already probably going to be doing this within a short period of time, but just kind of moved it forward a little bit. So, um,
Yeah.
it.
So how did you feel about like the expansion of programs, entitlement programs during the Great Depression, like unemployment benefits, expansion of food assistance, like food stamps, stuff like that, welfare programs?
Well, it was probably needed, and especially the unemployment extension of benefits. I know that the state went through. The state of Michigan was probably one of the worst ones for having because they had already had a problem with. All right, we're talking about the different actions that the government took as far as extending unemployment benefits. They also gave the states money to keep teachers, balance their budget, continue working on the roads, or lent out money so that they could continue fixing roads during the recession, which makes some sense because there's less people working and there's things that are going to have to be done anyways. So if you can kind of accelerate some of that, it might actually makes sense so that when the recovery does come, that the roads are in better condition and some of the don't have such a severe drop off and then try to rebuild afterwards.
Yeah. Do you think that the recessions or depressions can be prevented? Why or why not?
Well, probably not because most of the time it's kind of like a hysteria or it's a crowd movement.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what happened was everyone said, "Well, getting a home is the best thing in the world," and so for several years the prices and the values went up on the homes, and so more and more people said, "Well, I guess I better get in on that," and maybe they got bigger house than they needed, or they people that really weren't suitable for owning a home, they didn't have no reserves, or they might lose their job, or so I don't think it can totally be. You can't. They say you can't outlaw the business cycle, but it'd be nice if it was more tempered. And sometimes I think they've got it that way, but
Yeah.
I don't think they can really stop that.
Yeah. Last question: how has the Great Recession changed you?
Well, it's just not too much. I was trying to be a little cautious, with your fixed expenses and stuff, but I'm getting older, and it just I figure I'm gonna be probably working longer anyways. But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any major crises that happened, but it was nip and tuck a little bit but it's kind of always in the back of your mind. But I don't know. It seems like throughout my life, there's it seems like the good times are just a very short period of time, and more depressed times economically are lasting longer uh,
Mm-hmm.
than the total of the exuberant times.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for letting me interview you.